Seahawks fans, wherever you may be, welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, here with Keith Myers. We're recording Wednesday morning this week, and we're ready to go. We're going to talk Seahawks football. We're going to talk the Rams game. We're going to move ahead and talk the Arizona Cardinals game and everything in between. So first, let's bring Keith into the show. Hey, Keith.
Hey, Bill. How's it going?
It's going pretty well, actually. I'm apt, I've got a weird feeling about this week. I'm strangely optimistic that the Seahawks are going to figure out a way forward, right the ship on offense, get a little better on defense, and start winning football games again. Because losing 3 out of the last 4 is not my cup of tea. I don't want to do that. And this Seahawks team is, I think, better than that. And
well, the
so
offense,
we'll see.
The
see what
offense
happens.
was better than that for the first 8 games, and then on Sunday, just suddenly the offense just fell apart, and it's very difficult to understand why. I mean, the Rams didn't really do anything special other than, Jalen Ramsey having one of his best games of the year against DK Metcalf, but the rest of the offense, it's very difficult to figure out why they sputtered so much. And, then you run into the turnover problem too. So there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, and we will. We'll talk about all of it. It's crazy because ever since that first Arizona game, we went into the Arizona game a month ago, 5-0, coming out of a bye week, and lost that game. We should have won, played well enough to win, scored 27 points in the first half or something like that. And then we just let them back in, and ever since then, and they kind of dialed up a way to kind of disrupt Russell Wilson a little bit. I mean, it's kind of crazy. We ended up having like 500 and something yards in that game on offense, a couple hundred yards of rushing offense in that game. Some of that was Russell Wilson, but nonetheless, it should have been a win, and it just kind of created this downward little thing that's going on right now, and we just need to try to figure that out. Of course, we all know that the defense has got some fatal flaws to it as far as pass defense. The rush defense, though, is decent, ranked number 2 currently in the NFL, and maybe they can kind of build on that a little bit. I know Arizona has been pretty intent on running the football, and we'll get into Arizona too, but they've run the ball for 160 yards in 4 straight games. They've got 30 points plus in 5 straight. They're often, everything's dialed in for them, and we're kind of heading in the opposite direction. And I think until this game, I really do honestly believe if you really look at Arizona, they could have lost the last 3 games. We'd be talking about a completely different conversation. In Seattle, conversely, if Russell Wilson plays just his normal Russell Wilson magic way, we are likely, the winners of 2 or 3 of the last 4. So,
the 11 turnovers, 10 of which, 10 turnovers in the 3 losses. I mean, Wilson didn't have 10. I don't think Wilson had 10 picks all last year. Now, granted, it's not all picks. There's 3 fumbles mixed in there, but there's I think he's had more turnovers in the last 4 games than he had in all of 2019.
Yeah, and some of those are picks. Some of them are coming from fumbles because they're getting rushed. I thought, going into that Arizona game, our offensive line was actually stellar, and we were both kind of surprised at how good they all kind of came together and were protecting, and pass rush was not getting to Russell Wilson with the frequency it had in the past, and then the run game was fairly decent, and then Chris Carson went down, and pass protections kind of got screwed up, and Posick, got hurt in the last couple of games, and so it's really been a tale of almost, before the bye and then after the bye. It's like something happened there. I don't know what's going on. So let's talk about the Rams game for a while, and just kind of get a sense of what went on there, what happened. Seattle didn't really seem to be in this game from the opening kickoff. And even though the Rams really didn't do too much offensively in the second half, Seattle's defense tightened up. But Seattle's offense really just didn't do anything at all in this game to help the team win the game. And Russell Wilson, again, as you mentioned, is having one of the worst stretches of football in his career after clearly being the front runner for the MVP award. In the first 6 or 7 weeks of this season, in the last couple of weeks, it's just really tailed off. Jared Goff finished 27 to 37, 302 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Russell Wilson, 22 to 37, 59% completion, 0 touchdowns, couple interceptions, 60-yard rushings. I can't remember if he had a fumble in this game or not, but you're right. Turnovers were the difference early. I mean, the Rams put on like 17 points and 250 yards in their first 3 drives. And really the game at that point was in jeopardy.
Yeah, I mean, the defense just could not get a stop. They early on in this game, it wasn't just that the Rams were scoring. The Seahawks weren't putting up much resistance. I mean, it was really easy for them to go down and score.
I mean, they had drives of 70, 77 yards, and 93 yards. That was their first 3 possessions.
Yeah. And then, then there was the punt on 4th and inches.
Right at the beginning of the third quarter.
Right. And so you end up, you're 4th and inches, and you're
first possession
out near midfield
after the halftime.
And they punted away, and the Rams go 88 yards after the punt for a touchdown. And really at that point, the game felt like it was over because the defense wasn't stopping anyone, and you can't get inches. You don't trust the offense to get 6 inches on a play.
I think that's the biggest story out of this. People are really talking about this, and there's a lot of, what has been said has been said. For me, that's the key point right there, is the trust level. So Pete trusts his defense, his historically bad defense, who's really given up at that point after that punt, now given up 6 straight drives that end with points that have started with 88 yards or more. And versus the best quarterback in the division, the best player on the team, Russell, not in division, in NFL football, best player on the team, Russell Wilson, to get, 4 or 5 inches. That's tough, because the offense is ranked, in the top 5, top 3 overall, and your defense is just dead last, and it's disheartening. I think it goes to a bigger thing. I was thinking about the personality of this team. We've lost that edge a little bit. We've become soft, I think, primarily on defense. But when you're not allowing your offense to really just go for it and impose its will and dictate terms on opposing defenses, you're then allowing defenses to dictate terms on our really good offense. And that just does not seem like Pete Carroll's normal persona that he wants to have the team have.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it as, you look at even from earlier in the year, remember the Seahawks going for it on 4th and 5?
Yeah,
and hitting
that was in the first game.
And hitting that big play to Metcalf for a touchdown. And then there was another one, I think in the second game, where they, went for it on 4th and 1, and they hit Lockett for a big play down to like the 5-yard line. And they were aggressive, and it was amazing. And it came out and really looked good. They took advantage of the situations. They really put pressure on other teams. And so for them to be so passive in this game, and 4th and inches, not even attempt, no go for it or anything, just to punt it away, give the ball back to the Rams, and let them march 88 yards down the field for a touchdown. It was like, why? There's no logic to that. Like, what happened? What happened to the aggressive Seahawks that were dominant? Now they're just. It's like they don't remember who they are.
When Pete Carroll made that decision, in his brain, he already knew that his defense have had 10 opponent drives start inside their own 10-yard line, and 40% of those have ended in a touchdown, and 70% of those have ended in points. 70% have ended in points from 90 yards out.
Yeah, they're only
and the league average is less than 30%.
Yeah, they're only getting stops. They're only stopping teams from scoring, even when you pin them deep, inside the 10. You're only stopping teams from scoring 30%.
Russell Wilson leads the NFL in passer rating on fourth down. So you're literally taking the best weapon in the NFL on fourth down and sidelining him for your punter and your defense that has proven to be historically the worst defense of all time. It's crazy. Now, I get it under normal circumstances, and in Pete Carroll's long arc as an NFL coach, I get the decision in a bubble, in a by itself, without all those other stats. When you're on your own 42 and you're only down by 4 and it's early in the game, you tend to want to flip the field and put the opposing offense on its heels a little bit and get your defense out there and make it stop. And maybe that makes sense on a lot of different terms. I get that. And that has been true in the past.
But it's not true
not with this defense. You have to be able to be self-aware, Pete, and make those adjustments in season and in game to reflect where you're at as a team right now and what the team needs as far as psychologically to kind of move forward, and you nailed it early when you said, yeah, we were aggressive early in the season, and it really helped the offensive identity of this team. And now it seems like the offense is assuming the defense, the defensive personality in a sense.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So, and then I think the other thing that I kind of wanted to touch on with this game is that in the second half, the Seahawks offense did nothing. They got, the late field goal, which they kicked on second down, so that way they could try the onside kick and then take a couple shots at the end zone to tie. I actually thought that was a smart little bit of strategy and not trying to get the touchdown first because you were going to be out of time, and you weren't gonna have a chance to.
I agree with that.
Complete the comeback, but that was their only, the only points in the second half. That's
Russell Wilson's first game without a touchdown in a very long time.
Yeah, that was a mess. But the defense kept him in it.
Yeah,
in the second half.
That's kind of what gives me some optimism right now. That second half, I mean, granted, Whitworth went down. That was a big thing for them.
That was a huge thing. I mean,
that was big, but he's only one player, and you got to give some credit to the Seahawks defense. I mean, we've been looking to give them credit now for 9 games, and and they do deserve some. I mean, Dunlap's looks like he's a keeper. Poona Ford's having a great year, and especially the last 4 or 5 games, he's really coming on as a defensive tackle. That's proving to be not as one-dimensional as we've put him at. He's getting a little bit of penetration. Jerron Reed's kind of playing well. Jordan Brooks looks like a kind of a guy that I'm really intrigued about as an outside linebacker on the defense, especially as KJ Wright and Bobby Wagner have kind of tailed off slightly. So there is some optimism. There's just so many things. You just kind of don't know where to pin it down at. I mean, early in the season, we talked about the pass rush and the defensive line being a really bad point of influence on the defense that was causing all the problems.
I mean, in the first Arizona game, they did not touch. There was 0 quarterback hits.
Yeah. Well,
Zero
in the
sacks,
last 2
zero
games,
quarterback
Keith,
hits.
we're literally second in the NFL in quarterback hits, and
Yeah.
quarterback pressures.
So and what changed in that was Carlos Dunlap, really. And the team is being more aggressive, and
Adam's coming back.
they brought Adams back. Because he's healthier, not healthy, but healthier and playing again. And then the first Arizona game he didn't play. And so there are that's part of it. But the line has gotten better because they added Dunlap, which has made a major difference.
Rasheem Green's come back.
Rasheem Green's come back. So so they've been able to get additional help on the
Mayo is still out too. Maybe he comes back, and that adds just even one more little piece.
Yeah, I don't have
nice rotation there. I mean, if you play him less snaps, if you go from a 65% utilization to a 30%, I think that guy becomes a better player.
Yeah, because he doesn't have to set up his moves. He's not thinking about the run game as much. He's just your situational pass rusher.
Worn out. Yeah.
And so you're right. There's some of that. He was so ineffective before his injury that I'm not real excited. I'd rather see more Alton Robinson continue to get those 30% of the snaps there and continue his development. So that way next year he can be, kind of a dominant force.
Well, let me ask you this, Keith. So what's your overarching thought process on the last 4 weeks since we played Arizona? Like, what has the team gone from, and where are they at now? And is there any hope for where they could be in the remaining 7 games?
Well, I still think that they're at 6 wins, and there's 5 wins sitting out there that they should get no matter what. And that's, the Jets, the 3 NFC East teams, and the 49ers, right? So there's 5 wins that gets them to 11. That's a playoff team. And then reality, to get better than just getting into the playoffs, it's those 2. It's the Rams and Arizona game that starts this week that are the difference makers. And if they get, especially this one, they can get to 13 wins possibly, or at least 12, win the division, and better things happen. But what they need to do with all of that is they've got to fix this turnover problem, because these 11 turnovers over 4 games, 10 of them in the 3 losses, it's killing this team. The defense is not good enough for the offense to turn the ball over like that. In the first Arizona game, it wasn't just that Wilson turned it over. It was that he turned it over when they were about to score on 2 of them, and both of those need, even if they didn't get in and they kicked a field goal, the extra points would have mattered in the end. They would have won that game. The fumbles and the interceptions against Buffalo were bad, and the same thing against the Rams. Like, that one interception where it was thrown, I think it was to Disley in the corner of the end zone. The ball was late. Disley was open, but if the ball had arrived on time, it's a touchdown. But the ball was late, and he didn't need to throw it. He had 20 yards of open grass in front of him. Just run it, get the first down. And I know they were 40 yards out, but literally there was nobody in front of him. He would have picked up 20 yards easy on the ground, maybe more if he can pick up a block or 2, and get them down close. But instead he decides to throw it to a guy that sure was open, but the ball needed to be arriving by the time it was leaving Wilson's hand, and so people were able to make the adjustment, come over and get the pick. It just wasn't a good decision by Wilson. Wasn't a good, you can't make that decision. Go get the first down. And I think really what they need to do is they've just got to get Wilson going. They've got to get whatever he's doing, looking at this year. He's throwing a lot of out routes that are getting picked off and that kind of stuff. And and they've got to fix what's going on and how those decisions are being made. If they can get
they've
him,
become one-dimensional on offense.
if they can get him out of this funk that he's in, they go back to being a Super Bowl contender because the offense can be that
Okay,
good.
so let's talk about that for half a second. So we all know that they've got deep flaws on this team.
Every
some
team
of them
has
have
deep
come out
flaws
on
this year.
offense as well, but the defense for sure, right? So let me ask you this. So if they get those 5 wins or they get 6 and they go to 12 wins or 11, they get into the playoffs, they go far, they get to the Super Bowl, win or lose, they get to the Super Bowl. What then happens to the systemic issues that plague this team? There's still issues regarding personnel. There's still issues regarding, contracts in the offseason, scheme, defensive coordinator. We all know they just extended Pete Carroll. He's not going anywhere, but does he surround himself with better coaches? Does he cede control of some of the defensive situations so we can actually get a legit defensive coordinator in here for fresh ideas, fresh minds, fresh teaching, get the players in position to be successful better? All of that doesn't change even if we get to a Super Bowl.
Yeah. I look at it as I'd be willing to bet that they make a change at secondary coach just because of the lack of development of certain guys, and it's just not working. And I still think that you can't look at what's going on and the talent and how it's being used defensively. And I know Pete takes the blame for it, but this is, Ken Norton is the one who does the film work before the game plan is set. He's the one who calls the plays throughout the game. I mean, it's on him. And I get that Pete's not gonna fire him. He won't. But what he can do is he can do what he did with Rocky Sato, and that's promote him, make him an assistant head coach instead of defensive coordinator, and let someone else come in and do the job that Norton's currently doing. Dan Quinn would be a great recommendation if he can be brought in. And people say, "Oh, he won't go back to that." Whatever. You got to remember that Pete Carroll tried to bring Gus Bradley back, and that fell through and didn't happen. And then he went and signed Ken Norton to that spot. So I could definitely see it being a possibility to go get someone who knows the team, knows the system, but also just has a different set of eyes, a different set of ideas, and do that. But if you make it to the Super Bowl, there's a lot less incentive to make that change. Now, if you make it into the playoffs, but then lose pre-Super Bowl and you lose because of your historically bad defense, there's a lot of incentive to make that change, especially when your offense is at least going into this last week, they were the highest scoring offense in the NFL. And if you have the highest scoring offense in the NFL and you can't even get out of the playoffs because your defense is so bad, well, you got to make some changes on defense. And I think that's probably the most likely scenario, just because unless this defense steps up in a great way, I have a hard time seeing this team making it that far in the playoffs, because when you start running into the good teams, right, you're going to go play the Packers, and you think that Aaron Rodgers is going to eat that defense alive. Well, you're going to be disappointed. And then what you're asking is for Wilson and the offense to keep up. And can they? Sure. Can they 3 weeks in a row to get out of the playoffs against good teams? I don't know. That's the hard part.
All right, so let's turn our attention to the Arizona Cardinal game, Thursday night football. 6-3 Seattle takes on the 6-3 Arizona Cardinals. This is kind of the tipping point. And as we get into these later games in the season, in the NFC West, where we take a look at who's got the real opportunity to win the division. If Seattle drops this game, Keith, it's not looking good for Seattle. Arizona moves into statistically a 2-game lead against Seattle with 6 to go after this game. If Seattle wins, we take back control.
Yep.
Things look pretty rosy considering the strength of schedule ahead for both teams.
Yep.
Russell Wilson, the first 6 weeks, threw 8 touchdowns, 0 interceptions on deep passes over 40 yards. And since then has only had a couple of touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Seattle's 1-3 in the last 4 games. Kyler Murray leads the NFL in the Arizona offense overall in yards. Kyler Murray has thrown 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions on deep passes since week 5. But again, let's you got to really look at it. I mean, they lost to the Dolphins. They could have lost to the Bills. They should have lost to the Bills. I mean,
They should have lost.
They came
to
up
the
with a
Bills.
heroic play at the end there.
Yeah, I mean, you have. I get you're throwing it up to Nuke Hopkins, and that is an advantage. But there were 3 defensive players there, and nobody made a play on the ball. I mean, that's just
sure. I mean, it was like the Hail Mary that Seattle had, at one point. But
they've had multiple.
But they made it. They made it. They won. They got to 6-3. I just don't know. This is, again, I'm a little optimistic here, but I believe that Seattle is going to win this game because I think that we're the better team. I really honestly do. We lost in overtime. We shouldn't have lost that game. We really gave it up. A lot of different things had to happen in order for Arizona to have an opportunity. Same in the Bills game. The Bills were up early on that in that game, 23-9, with 5:44 left in the third quarter, and they just kind of stopped playing a little bit. Arizona kind of came back, and then they had to make the huge play at the end with no time left on the clock, basically, to secure that thing. I think, though, things need to change a little bit. Seattle needs to go into this game. Last time we had 572 yards on offense, a couple of hundred yards rushing. Some of that was Russell Wilson, but nonetheless. I think overall, though, when we've seen the pattern in the last 4 weeks, I think Seattle really needs to kind of get back to the basics. Need that quick hitting, shallow route passing game to help get Russell Wilson into a rhythm, limit those turnovers, create some misdirection, some RPOs, and some screens to help beat those aggressive pass rushes that Seattle's been seeing, some of those blitzes, and run the ball to help them kind of clock manage the game and get keep the defense off the field a little bit, and keep the opportunities with our offense and Russell Wilson, and give maybe Russell Wilson a little bit extra protection, like max protect on the offensive line a little bit to help him secure the ball.
That's one of the things that we've seen over this slide. So near the end of the Arizona game, they made an adjustment and they started bringing 8 guys up in the box like they were all going to blitz. And then they would send 5 and drop 3 out. Or they would send 6 and drop 2 out. And you never knew which of the 2 was going to drop and that it created an interception from Wilson, and it created a lot of problems. They were able to get pressure because, you make line calls, you're trying to figure out who's coming, and so you block from the inside out. But the guys in the middle don't come. They're the ones that drop out. So you've got your guards blocking no one, and 2 guys coming free. And so teams started, they did that. It worked. It helped Arizona get back into the game.
Yeah.
The 49ers did a lot of the same stuff, although they didn't have the personnel to really make it work. But the Bills came in, and so did the Rams, and really just followed that blueprint. And
and Seattle hasn't solved it.
No.
Which is confounding to me. Like, how can you do that for 3 out of the last 4 teams you faced? You did not address those systemic issues that have created problems for your best player.
You look at this, you got to have a back in there. You got to have a tight end in there. And both of them have to have blocking responsibilities first. So you pick up the blitz first and then go out into a pattern. You can't have 5 guys blocking, knowing that they're going to bring 5, but you don't know which 5. And then you end up with...
Russell Wilson needs to do a better job in recognizing blitzes or packages where they could be susceptible and check down out of those things, or create a play where it's much quicker developing
So,
all the turnovers,
we've seen,
almost all the sacks, not all of them, but some of them can go untouched and they get to them in less than 2 seconds. But most of them are long developing plays.
yeah, and that's coming from the game plan where
Yeah, exactly.
they want they want to take those deep shots. They want to use Lockett and Metcalf deep because that's where their strength is and all of that. But
But let's set up the defense to allow Russell Wilson to pick and choose those things instead of trying to run those plays, 10, 12 times a game.
Yeah.
Let's hone it down a little bit and be more efficient.
Yeah, and so you look at the very first drive that Seattle had against the Rams, right, where they just marched down the field, scored a touchdown. Alex Collins looked good on a couple of runs. There was a lot of quick hitting stuff, a lot of spacing concept to take advantage of the holes in Arizona's zones as they blitzed, and you saw Freddie Swain get two big receptions on that drive, because he's a slot guy, right? Keep doing that because what that does is that forces the team to back out of those blitz situations. And it creates a situation where now you have time to let those longer developing plays, take effect and, different concepts. So that way you
can spread them out a little bit.
Yeah. So that way you can get, your big receivers open downfield and that kind of stuff. But you have, they started out with a really effective game plan with that first drive, and then they went away from it. It's very frustrating, and it's kind of this Brian Schottenheimer thing that when things are working, he's reluctant to continue doing them. He wants to go back to the big play and whatever, rather than continuing to ride the hot hand of what works. And I really think that the game plan that they started with in that first drive, not only did it work then, but it'll work always. You can always get those, short 8-yard passes and run the ball well and force teams to back off, because when you're letting them come up and run those blitz packages that have been killing Seattle the last few weeks.
Well, and a lack of a true running game too is makes it a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, I mean, not having Chris Carson does matter. It really
in this situation, we know that Arizona blitzes 41.7% of the time, ranked third in the NFL. Let's take advantage of that. Let's figure out a way to turn that into an advantage for the offense by creating some screens, by allowing those guys to come in and having a run pass option or misdirection or handing the ball off occasionally on a delayed handoff. I think we can do it. We just need to figure it out. And hopefully they've had enough time. This will be the second game, and we can get ahead. How about Seattle on defense, Keith? Last time they tried to contain Kyler Murray, failed at that. Kyler Murray had a field day. He passed better than he normally did against the Seahawks.
A lot of what they did in that game was they tried to they pulled a guy out of coverage, and they used Shaquem Griffin to basically be a spy in the middle. And they were like, don't let him run, right? You don't have coverage responsibilities. Your job is to just spy him. If he takes off running, go get him. And
failed at those responsibilities so badly that he hasn't started since.
He hasn't really played on defense since. He's just been a special teamers. I mean, he played more snaps in that game than in any game in his career, except for the very first game his rookie year. And it just didn't work. I mean, it was a kind of a failed experiment, and they would have been better off either having someone else in coverage to try and cover guys up, or blitzing someone and just trying to get after Murray a little more. Now, Murray is the least.
Murray's only been sacked 13 times in 2020 after 48 times in 2019. So they're clearly have really made a difference, and he's more pocket aware this year.
He's that and that's what a lot of it is. He's more pocket aware. Their offensive line is better in that they had injuries there last year, and they've managed to avoid them for the most part this year. But for him, he's more pocket aware. He's moving away from the pressure better. He's making better choices as to when to run. But he is like Russell Wilson, especially Russell Wilson earlier in his career, where it looks like you've got him, and then you miss, and then it's a big play, whether it's he runs for 15 or he throws for 20. Like he's very frustrating to play against, and they've got to do a better job of kind of containing that. Like, don't run past him. If he is taking a 5-yard drop, when you're trying to get around the corner as a pass rusher, don't go 7 yards deep, because all you're doing is creating a huge lane for him to move in, and he'll slide in that direction and buy himself time. You've got to pinch in. You've got to stay in front of him so that way he can't, just have it that easy. And, you got to be more disciplined. You can't run the stunts and the switches and things that you're used to running on the line. You've got to be more disciplined in your lanes.
So does that point to a situation where they might stick with rushing 4 and move to an extra defensive back in this game to help kind of contain that energized passing game that they do have? Hopkins is going to be tough. We know that Trey Flowers is probably going to get that assignment. That sucks. But do we blitz as frequently in this game as we have in the last 4 games or so?
I don't think you can, because you're going to get burned by Murray's legs. So I think you have to play a little bit more passive defensively, but you also don't want to just rush 4 because your front 4 haven't been getting home.
But we do have Carlos Dunlap now, and we're getting Mayoa back, and maybe and Reed and Ford have kind of been more effective, and we got Snacks Harrison in there now. Maybe the defensive line is better now, and we just haven't seen enough games to really kind of prove that out. But this could be a difference in this game.
The difference maker in this game versus the last game, I think, other than Dunlap, who I think is a big addition, but the one that really intrigues me and the one that I think is going to make the biggest difference is going to be Jordan Brooks, the rookie linebacker, because he should have been the one with the responsibility of
or Adams.
What? Or
Jamal Adams.
Those are the guys that have the responsibility of Kyler Murray, right? And so it's going to be one of those 2 guys, and neither of those guys played in the last one. And so, you might see them blitz, but they're going to blitz in a situation where their initial, they're not blitzing into a block, right? It's going to be a delayed blitz. It's going to be they're the spy. Once they once we have the play and there's a path to the quarterback, they take it, and that kind of stuff. So I think
a delayed blitz is actually the exact way that you defend Kyler Murray.
I mean,
because then because he pulls out of his passes. If something's not there, he pulls down and he runs. And if you can get him in the backfield, you can chase him down. I mean, he's quick, he's fast, but man, when you swarm him and you keep disciplined, like you said about keeping your lanes as you're rushing, that is the key, I believe.
Yeah, and so I really think that you have those 2 guys in there doing those things instead of Shaquem Griffin. I think it makes a big difference on being able to slow Kyler Murray down. I'm just, when they played Arizona last time, they had 0 quarterback hits. When they lost to Buffalo, they had 0 passes defended, right? Which goes to show you how much the defense has switched. It went from no pass rush and just terrible up front. The front end has gotten better, but the back end has gotten worse.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't hurt to have your 2 starting corners out, and it's a tough situation.
And your starting nickel, and your backup strong safety, and your third string strong safety.
Injuries are starting to pile up on the defense, which is interesting. But hopefully they get better, and in time we can get everyone together, and maybe this thing turns around a little bit. But you do have to slow down Murray. I mean, he's got, considering how we think that Russell Wilson's kind of been more effective running the ball this year. He's got 350 yards, a couple touchdowns, etc.
Seattle's leading rusher.
Yeah, Seattle's leading rusher by 5 yards. Kyler Murray has 87 carries for 604 yards and 10 touchdowns. I mean, this guy's a legit threat to score from anywhere on the field, and I don't necessarily want to spy him, but I do want to play straight up solid, fundamentally sound defense against this guy, and I think that gives Seattle the best chance. I really do. What we just talked about.
Yeah.
So we're going to make this show fairly quick for time constraint reasons. And maybe that's better for all you listeners. I don't know. We'll figure that out going forward. So we're gonna kind of wrap this thing up. But give me your prediction on how you think this is going to play out, at least for Thursday Night Football, and maybe a little bit going forward.
Okay, so I think the offense gets rolling again. One of the advantages of a short week is that there's a lot less game planning, and you just do you on these super short weeks like this. And so they're going to come out and just do what they do best. And I think that it gives Wilson a chance to just go play and less thinking, and let him get going again. I think they get their offense back to where it was pre-Rams.
Sounds like we might have Carlos Hyde back.
Yeah,
at least,
and
maybe Carson.
That'll make a big difference, is having either one of them back, just to help with the running game. But I think the offense gets going again, and gets to their 34-point average.
How do we get Metcalf going again?
Don't have
specifically against Peterson too.
I mean, okay, so they can do things to get him away from the coverage. Like they did it at times, but not enough in this last game, where they would put him in motion or put Lockett in motion, so that way it changes the responsibilities of who's covering who, and do those things to get matchup situations that you want, and then take advantage of them. And they just didn't seem to actually make much of an effort to try and do that against the Rams, and they really need to. I mean, Patrick Peterson frustrated Metcalf in the last game, but
I'd love to see a revenge game here where it's just he just works his ass off and physically dominates him like he did against the guy from the Bills. I can't remember his name.
Josh Norman, and also Gilmore of the Patriots. Right, there's a couple of really good corners that Metcalf has dominated, and he has shown that when he has one of these really frustrating games, the next week he just puts on a clinic. And so he had a really frustrating game against the Rams. So go out and put on a clinic, dude. But I think the Seahawks get it going offensively. They get back to the 34 points a game. Defensively, they've just got to do enough. I think they end up winning this game like 34-31 and pull home a win.
Yeah.
It's going to be tough.
That's interesting, Keith. I hope it's not that close. I would love to see the Seahawks score 35 points again, and get back to that. And I think that they can do that against this Arizona defense. I really do. I mean, they had 500 and some odd yards against them that first game, and they were on a roll, 27 points, and they just stopped. They stopped being aggressive, and the game kind of got squirrely on them. And but I do believe that they can put up the yards, put up the points. Now it's the defense, right? And I do believe we're actually turning the corner a little bit, at least with our defensive line. I think we're stout against the run. That's really going to help in this game. If you can create a one-dimensional situation for Arizona, which I believe that they can, even though the Seattle's really given up a lot of yards, I think if they do play straight up defense in this game and maybe drop back an extra defender more than normal, they contain this thing, and it's hard for Arizona to score more than 30 points. If Seattle has the ball a lot and they're marching and scoring, you're keeping the ball away from Arizona. So I think they're under average on their points scored, and we win like 35 to 23 to 27, something like that. So
cool.
Why don't you send us out of here? Wrap this thing up, man.
All right. So you can find us on Twitter. The show is at Hawks Playbook. You can find us at SeahawksPlaybook.com, and on YouTube, search for Seahawks Playbook. You can find Bill on Twitter at NW Seahawk, Northwest Seahawk. And you can find me at Myers NFL. And I think that's everything. Did I miss anything? It's been a while since you've had me do
it. I know. I probably shouldn't have surprised you, but there you go.
Whatever, it works. All right. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.